This episode is sponsored by StationWise, the first staffing software to be truly firefighter proof. Now, you may be wondering why I have software as a sponsor when I focus usually on physical and mental health of the first responders, and I will tell you exactly why. For the first time, this is a staffing platform that also is able to integrate wellness information through call load tracking, exposures, and wearables integration. Now, of course, StationWise focuses on staffing and allows you to manage staffing, choose vacation picks, put in rules for leave and trades, and even deploying strike teams. But through the latest programming and AI automation, they have streamlined this process to free up battalion chiefs so they can focus on what they're supposed to be doing on the operational side and the fireground. Now, StationWise is also able to monitor not only how many calls we've responded to in the shift, but the duration of the call, therefore the rest and recovery in between, thus monitoring the sleep deprivation that degrades our health and performance. It's accessible not only through the computer, but also on Apple and Android devices, meaning that you can access it not only within the station itself, but outside as well. Now, one of the most powerful features of StationWise, in my opinion, is the ability to run reports. Therefore, for example, be able to see just how much money is being used on overtime that could actually be front-loaded for proactive staffing, as well as setting alarms knowing when you are hitting overtime parameters. And another important feature is the integration of other programs and software for payroll, training, reports, etc. Now, StationWise is trusted by numerous agencies in California, Texas, and Idaho. And if you want to hear the full story from the founder, who he himself is a son of a firefighter, listen to episode 1163 with Marcus Edwards. And if you want to book a demo or learn more, go to stationwise.com. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show elite off-road racer and firefighter Kellon Walch. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from his journey into the world of motorcycle racing, overcoming a near-death injury, TBIs, Area 51, the Dakar Rally, sleep and performance, ketamine, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of almost 1,200 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Kellon Walch. Enjoy. Well, Kellon, I want to start by saying two things. Firstly, thank you to our mutual friend, Dr. Jonathan Edwards, for making this connection. And secondly,
John.
He's amazing. Actually, I just saw him recently. It was fantastic.
Oh, okay.
And then secondly, I want to welcome you onto the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. I've watched some of your shows and I enjoy what you're doing. It's pretty interesting. And it's I travel about 2 hours to work every day, so it's a good listen for me.
Yeah, there's one episode each way then. All right. So very first question, where on planet Earth are we finding you today?
I'm at home, finally. Not very often I'm at home, but I'm in Alamo, Nevada, little tiny town in the middle of nowhere, about 2 hours north of Vegas, straight north of Vegas. Literally in the middle of nowhere. It's an amazing place.
Beautiful. Well, very first thing, what took you there specifically?
My family's been here since 1864 in this area. They've been running cattle here forever. My wife's family's from here. I think her family's been here since the early 1900s. They have a little cattle ranch here as well, and her family ran cattle here. It's in the desert. We're in Nevada, but it's a little. We have a little stream that runs through the whole valley, so it's kind of a little fertile valley. There's always been animals and plants here. It's called Paranagate Valley. It's like an Indian name for like valley of waters, but it's a little plate. It's a little piece of heaven for us. There's fields out here you can't see. We're on 45 acres, but there's fields. There's green. So for the desert, it's a pretty nice little place, and it's a good place to raise a family and kids.
Do you know what got your ancestors to go to there specifically when they had the whole place to choose from?
You know what? I'm not really sure. A lot of my dad's family, which is the Walch family, were cattle ranchers. I know some of my other family and some of my wife's family came here and kind of settled here as back in the day when the Mormons had come out west, and then they sent some of the families out to kind of settle some towns and settle some areas. And her family came out here and settled this area as like a Mormon colony. And Las Vegas, as I don't know if you know or not, was kind of settled by some Mormons as well as they came out and settled that area. So
very interesting. Well, you mentioned about being born and raised there. Tell me what your parents did and how many siblings you have.
So I have a younger brother and a younger sister. I'm the oldest. There's not a lot to do out here for work. Most people drive to Vegas, or we're pretty close to Area 51, or we call it the Nevada test site. So there's quite a few people that work out there. My brother's actually a fireman out at the Nevada test and training range, so out at the test site. My dad was a fireman in Las Vegas. He was a captain for 28 years. His brother was a captain also on the Clark County Fire Department in Las Vegas. And then my grandpa, who was a cattle rancher, he got married to my grandma was a lamb. They're pretty famous there in Vegas. And he says, you're going to stop cattle ranching and come down and get a real job and be a fireman. So my grandpa started on the Clark County Fire Department in 1955, and he was on the fire department there for 37 years.
Amazing.
So I kind of grew up at the breakfast and dinner tables. Family's really important to us, and listening to all the stories. They have another brother who's a cop in Las Vegas. So between him and then my grandpa and my dad and his brother who are firemen, we always got to hear stories, and they were running calls together. And I remember as a little kid, it was always, they would come home and they just tell stories, and we'd sit at the breakfast table and just listen to what happened that shift and what happened the shift before. And it was pretty interesting.
When you look back now with this kind of veteran lens that you have, what were the pros of growing up in a firefighter family? And then, if any, what were the cons of being a child of a firefighter?
I think the pros was my dad was around quite a bit. He was my high school football coach. He was able to do that, in between shifts. And I ended up racing. He wasn't a racer, but I just started liking motorcycles and started riding out to the desert in my backyard. And he was around and supported me a lot through that. Now the shifts were crazy, work on Christmas and work on New Year's. New Year's is huge in Vegas, so we never saw him on New Year's or anything like that. But he was around quite a bit to help support all of us kids in a lot that we did. So that was definitely a plus. And growing up, just hearing those stories and raising us kids, the way that they did. My grandpa still had cattle and worked on the cattle ranch as well as being a fireman up here. And so it was a good life. I think maybe some of the negatives was my dad was gone a lot. I don't remember him. We always did Christmas. It wasn't always, we opened presents because to get to work in Vegas from where we're at, it's almost 2 hours. So if he was working Christmas Day, we woke up at 4 a.m. to open our presents. Or if he was working New Year's and working Christmas Day, we were always kind of juggling our schedules and stuff like that. We missed a lot of the holidays, but that's kind of the fireman life. So we got used to it.
You mentioned about did you say your brother works in Area 51?
Yeah, he works for it's NTTR, the Nevada Training and Test Range Fire Department out there.
Okay. Well, before I forget to ask this question, what are some of the funniest myths and what are some of the unknown realities of actually living and or working in that area?
I don't know. He doesn't tell me anything. He can't say anything. We grew up out there. I mean, we're right next to that place, but I know that they're busy out there. They got a lot of stuff going on. They don't run a lot of medical calls per se. Their call volume's not huge, but I know that every day they're quite busy, whether it's standby for for this training or that training, or if it's standby, they have planes in the air or they're doing flights, stuff like that. They're sitting out on the runway and stuff like that. So I know they're quite busy out there doing stuff.
What about in the town itself? Have there been any conversations of sightings or anything, or is it people from away from that area that are actually obsessed with it?
No, it's, I mean, definitely stuff going on out there. I think it's more like, a lot of development of aircraft and stuff like that. I remember my dad telling stories that they saw the, you know, the stealth bombers and B-1 bombers and stuff before they were even out. If you see a stealth jet and you don't know what it is, it looks pretty much like a UFO, I guess you could say. And then being a cattle rancher, there's stories of my grandpa and even my father-in-law would tell stories of other cattle ranchers that would come up on their cows and they're like torn apart with like a laser and like almost inspected with like a laser and kind of picked apart. You always hear stories like that, but I've never seen anything like that. But um, it's we get a lot of people that go out there and stuff like that, but they're just doing stuff out there as far as technically trying to all the aerodynamics and stuff like that for flight and stuff like that. And I've been out there with my off-road background a little bit. I've had an opportunity to do some military training, trying to teach you guys how to ride bikes, side by sides, and their off-road trucks and stuff like that. So I've kind of been out there a little bit as well and stuff like that. So
No anal probes as of yet.
not yet.
Well, you mentioned again about starting this whole journey riding a bike out in your backyard in the desert. So kind of walk me through that from the childhood point of view. What were other sports that you were playing, and then what was the beginning of this obsession with the motor side?
So yeah, we live in this little tiny town. Sports are huge here. A lot of good kids. We play 8-man football, but the whole town comes. It's one of those stories where the whole town comes out, watches the basketball game, watches the football game. It's what the town talks about all week. And I think in the last 8 years, our football team's lost like 3 games. I think in 8 years they've won. I can't remember. They've lost the championship maybe once or twice. They just won the championship again. My wife played all sports. My wife right now is the volleyball high school coach, and then my daughters are playing volleyball. They just won the state championship about a month ago. So sports is huge for us here in the small little town. Everyone gets out. It really is. It's almost like it kind of go back in time, but all the kids go down to the dunk ball courts and play. They play games. They call night games. It's super safe. I mean, my kid, we're about 4 miles from town, and he'll ride his scooter down to the middle of town, and they'll play games. And okay, be home at 11:30 or whatever, 11 o'clock, and we don't see him, and we're pretty sure they're safe down there playing. And so, growing up in a little town like that's pretty cool. So sports was huge. My dad, like I said, my dad helped coach our high school football team. So I played football and basketball, and then I don't know why, but for some reason I just started. I have a love for motorcycles and started riding motorcycles. My dad knows nothing about them. In fact, I asked him to change more oil one time before a race because I think I was playing basketball, and he changed the oil, but he forgot to put it back in. And I went about 13 miles in the race and blew that bike up. But he had to buy me a new one. That was the first new bike I got, and he had to buy it. And my parents made me buy everything, but I just loved motorcycles and just started from there. Literally, my backyard is the perfect place. Hundreds and hundreds of miles of nothing but desert, and so just started riding, started racing locally, went in kind of local championships, and kind of moved up to the national stage, and it just kind of took off from there.
What was it about your journey that created you being a champion in these events? If you didn't have the mentorship, for example, from a parent.
I think growing up in this town, we're hard workers. I mean, everyone here, all the kids in the high school, they play sports, but they play like 3 or 4 different sports. Nowadays, all the kids usually just kind of zone in on one sport and play one sport. The kids here, we're hard workers. In the summer, they're baling hay and working cows, and they're out and about. I don't think anyone's sitting at home and playing Nintendo or Xbox or anything like that. Everyone gets out and about and does stuff here. It's a very active town. So I think growing up that way was a good way. And then also my dad being a fireman, and he's mentally tough. I mean, my dad is probably one of the hardest workers I know. He'll go out there and dig a ditch still. And even on the fire department, they said he was one of the hardest workers. I mean, as a captain, he'd be out there, overhauling and working hard and dragging hose. And I think just having him growing up with my family and grandpa and running cattle and doing all that stuff, just you work hard and it kind of prepares you mentally. And for racing on the national stage. It helped a lot.
What about career aspirations? What were you dreaming of becoming when you were in the high school age?
I always kind of wanted to play football, and then I took after my mom, and I'm real small and skinny. And then I always wanted to race, but I wasn't really quite sure it was there. And then I think it was I turned 16, and I actually got a factory support ride from a company, a motorcycle brand called Husqvarna, and they were trying to make a big push back in the U.S. And I think that year we won the championship, won a couple other races, and I remember being 16. I made almost $20,000 that year, and I was like, for me, that was huge. I was used to having to pay for my gas, pay for tires, pay for gear, pay for everything, and I actually made a little bit of money that year. I was like, maybe we could do this. Maybe we could do this for a living. And I from that point on, I tried and I pushed hard and tried to make it work for a long time, and thought it was maybe possible. I saw some heroes of mine that were racing and making it work, like Danny Hamill and Ty Davis and a few off-road people, and they were making a living at it. And I was like, oh, it might be possible to do this. And so worked really hard at that. I kind of always had the fire. I mean, I knew it wasn't going to last forever. It wasn't going to be a long time deal. And so I kind of always had the fire department on the back burner, kind of plan B, I guess you could say.
So walk me through that pre-fire department then. Kind of, what level did you get to? Again, what served you well in competition? And then, what, if any, were some of the injuries or things that kind of made you shift away from it?
Yeah. From 16, when I was 16 years old, started doing it, started making a little bit of money. And then obviously there's a lot of injuries. I think some of my first big injuries were concussions. Hit my head a couple of times, got knocked out really good. And then I was playing high school football, and I remember getting a couple of concussions. And I knew I'd have a concussion if I kind of hit my head and I got nauseated. And if I got nauseated, started throwing up, I'm like, yep, that was a good one. Back then, we didn't know like a lot about concussions. You know what I mean? I mean, looking back at it now, I never would have let me play some of those football games or go back out on the race course knowing I just hit my head the weekend before, But it was different back then. But ultimately, I kind of did the race thing. Luckily, when I graduated high school, I'd had a couple bad injuries, but I was having probably the most success I had was riding for a company, Kawasaki motorcycles. And it was a tough decision for us being from the Mormon church, so the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We usually go on a mission when we're 19. And I had the opportunity to try to decide if I was going to go on a mission or stay home and marry my high school sweetheart or leave for 2 years and give up racing. And I ended up leaving for 2 years, which was kind of good looking back on it now, kind of giving my brain a rest, even though I was having quite a bit of race success then. But I went on a mission for 2 years and then came back and picked up the racing right where I left off.
You mentioned about the head injuries, and we were talking. You just literally had an incident again when you were racing yesterday. With this high incidence of TBIs in your profession, probably coupled with some other psychological stuff, because most of us that are chasing adrenaline usually are compensating for something else. What is the mental health conversation in your world when it comes to the sports side? Are you seeing a lot of addiction, suicide elements that we see in the fire service as well?
Yes, especially in the off-road, what you call like the extreme sports athletes, and they get that. I see it quite a bit, not only from the injury side, which is frustrating, but the concussion side, and then they're used to that adrenaline rush, and they're used to that, all the people being around them, the social media and everything like that, and that rush. And then when that kind of fades away, or when they get the concussion like that, it kind of we know it has a direct effect on unfortunately, there's been quite a few people that have taken their lives and chosen the suicide route. And it's tough. There's a lot of people in our sport who get injured, get addicted to the pain pills, and it kind of goes down a very long road after it gets addicted to the pain pills. And it's tough to come back. And then the mental side it really messes them up. We see it quite a bit, just like on the fire department, very similar type of deal.
And I think that underlines it. We see it in the SEALs, we see it in music, we see it in Hollywood. There's a lot of us that find ourselves in certain areas that are driven by early life. And in our field, when wearing a uniform, a lot of times it's, wanting to protect, wanting to be there on someone's worst day, wanting to fill the void with, excitement. And then you have that tribal element, you have the identity. Well, these are all universal human concepts. So you can take that blueprint and apply it to other professions or other sports, and it's the same exact conversation. And if you watch the documentary The Weight of Gold, you see it in the Olympians. These athletes have been training since they were children, as you said, one single sport. They finally podium, and then they age out and they're like, well, now what? Who am I? What is my identity? I've always been a swimmer or whatever it is. And now they're having to refine who the person was pre fire service, pre, Olympic gymnastics, whatever the thing is.
Yeah, no, exactly. Um, Yesterday, we had a race this last weekend where I just hit my head yesterday. We crashed last night, but it's a smaller race. It's not like the Baja 1000. It's like more like a loop race. So it's like a 15-mile loop. And the owner of our team, it's called Concrete Motorsports. He has a company out of Texas called Ameritex. But he did an event for vets. They have his organization there. Then he gave the vets a ride in one lap in the trophy truck, which is mind blowing. You probably don't know much about trophy trucks, but it's a $1.5 million truck. There's nothing like it in the world. It handles bumps and jumps and at 120, 130 miles an hour. It's mind blowing. But we got to bring some of the vets out, and we gave four vets a ride each morning. And it's a same scenario with the military, the background that they've had, the trauma injury that they've had, the things that they've seen, the kind of the same thing that these extreme sport athletes are seeing. And even on the fire department, the same thing. It's the same story, like you just said. And those guys were awesome. I got to talk to them, and it was this kind of after I got my concussion last night. We're kind of talking about some of the same stuff. But for those guys to come out and get that adrenaline rush in that trophy truck, the guy told me, he said, I haven't had my heart rate that high since I was last deployed. He's like, that was amazing. Feel that rush again. It was just something cool that the owner of our team did this last weekend, actually yesterday and Saturday. So that was pretty cool. But going back to, honestly, some of the extreme sports guys, they get like you said, they're getting done and like, okay, well, now what do I do? I've done nothing but ride motorcycles my entire life. I don't have any other skill sets. But I've got a lot of quite a few people who the fire department's a good answer for that. I mean, the fire department. I mean, let's be honest. It does give you that adrenaline rush, whether it's a car accident or you're trying to save someone's life or going into a big fire or something like that. It kind of fills that void, and it's a good career for a lot of those guys who are trying to transition. And it's, you got that good family atmosphere at the dinner table and stuff like that. So it's a good stepping stone, I guess you could say, for a lot of the athletes like that.
Absolutely. Well, what made you actually transition to full-time firefighting?
Um, I had a bunch of injuries, string of injuries besides concussions. I remember, I think 2004 is my first big one that really kind of caught me off guard and like made me start thinking about it. But I ended up breaking my femur and shattering my pelvis down in Mexico. We weren't even racing; we were pre-running, so you have a chance to go and look at the course and kind of make lines and figure out where you want to go on race day. I ended up crashing in the middle of nowhere in Mexico and laid there for 8 hours with a broken femur and a shattered pelvis. I didn't know my pelvis was that bad at the time, but I had a line off the course. For those who are kind of familiar with Baja, you can kind of choose different lines. I was kind of off. It was going to be a little bit faster spot. I hit a rock, went over the handlebars, and the bike ended up hitting me in the back. I think that's what broke my femur and my pelvis. But yeah, I literally couldn't crawl from where I was at. I knew my femur was broke, but I didn't know how bad my pelvis was. But I could not physically get, 50 yards over to where the actual course was. And so I ended up laying there for 3 or 4 hours before someone found me. And then at that point, there was no way I was getting on a motorcycle or even like a race truck. I could not physically sit in a seat to get out of there. And so, long story short, after 8 hours, we got a pickup truck to me, strapped me in the back of the pickup truck, and we'd go a little bit. And I could just feel my pelvis grinding. And I'd go throw up a little bit, go a few more miles, throw up a little bit, because we're in a very remote, hard to get to sand wash in the middle of nowhere in Mexico. And they couldn't fly me out because it was storming, so none of the helicopters would fly then. So anyway, long story short, we got to a little town called San Felipe. After San Felipe, there was a little bit of a clinic there with a ambulance. They took me up to the border to Calexico. Then from Calexico, they flew me to Las Vegas, where Dr. Jonathan helped me get surgery and all the proper care I needed. But that was the first one that kind of like took me to recover a while. And then from then on, when you're racing at 100 miles an hour on a bike, you're kind of always like, I wonder if I would have crashed or if I hit that rock again. So when I was young, you never think about that. You're just wide open all the time going, balls to the wall. So that one got me thinking. And then after that, I had a long string of I had a contract with KTM at that time, and I was supposed to do the Dakar Rally. And I did the Dakar Rally, which that year we started in Barcelona, Spain, went down through Spain, went across the Strait of Gibraltar, raced through Mauritania, Mali, Senegal, through the Sahara Desert, and we finished at Dakar, Africa. And I missed the last 2 years of that contract because of injuries. Crashed another time in Mexico, got knocked out, broke my shoulder. And then the other time I crashed really hard in Washington State, shattered both my ankles, had 2 casts on my ankles, couldn't walk for a while. I remember my wife leaving to work. She's like, I've got your lunch. It's at the bottom of the fridge. Crawl over to the bottom of the fridge and get your lunch, and I'll be back at dinner time. Um, and then there's a few other injuries. We were testing in Mexico with KTM, and I ended up doing like a tank slapper, what we call, hit the tank, and I thought I just kind of hit my hit my testicles pretty good. This is one of those. I'm like, I get home, and long story short, I waited a couple of days, and then I couldn't walk, and it was the size of an apple. Sorry for the
No, you're fine.
but
You're amongst friends.
yeah. I ended up going to the hospital there, and the guy's like, "Oh yeah, you got an infection. Here's some antibiotics." And the next day, it was about the size of an orange, and I was like, "This is the most pain I've ever been through. I'm either just going to end it all, or something's got to happen." And I ended up going to a urologist, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, that thing, yeah, testicular torsion. That was the first thing they should have checked for.
Oh,
We've got to cut that thing out right now." So that was actually before I even had any of my kids, but I lost one of those, and so just a combination. It's hard. You get a little bit of salary, but you're getting paid as you go to races and stuff like that. So if you're not going to races, or you're at the hospital, or you're trying to get back into it, it makes it really tough to make a living and to support a family. And so I did that for a few years. You kind of get it on the couch where you're injured. Then you finally get back up to race pace. You get back into shape, which takes almost a year. And then you get hurt again, and then you kind of start at the bottom, and you do that again. And it's a mental game. It's frustrating, and it's hard to make a living. And finally, I was like, they say in off-road racing, with age comes the cage. And so I tried to make that transition into racing trucks and something with a roll cage and a 5-point harness.
If you could be the voice in everyone's ear, where would that middle ground be between chasing excellence in extreme sports and, life-altering injuries and death that we see in everything from motocross to, skydiving, etc.?
So tough. I'm going to tell you right now, I've had 3 personal friends that are really close to me that have died doing what I do. I've got a teammate that was at KTM with me who did the Dakar Rally with me. Him and I were 2 of the youngest kids to do the Dakar Rally. And he ended up getting paralyzed a couple of years after that. So he's been paralyzed for probably 15 years. Still a great friend, great guy, but life-altering change. And unfortunately, in the sport of off-road motorcycles, it seems like the dangers are there to get paralyzed quite a bit more. My teammate at Red Bull and Ford right now, his 16-year-old son just got paralyzed. And it's tough. Where do you draw the line? I still ride a little bit for fun, and my boy rides a little bit, but there's that risk. And it's like, really, should I? I'm 42 years old. Should I be going to the motocross track and doing this? It's kind of always in the back of your mind, but it's tough, like you said. And the desert racing is. My personal friend died in Mexico at the Baja 1000, and just a freak thing. But you just never, where do you draw the line? I have other firemen. There's quite a few firemen that ride motocross, and he's like, "Oh, dude, I just crashed and I freaking tweaked my neck. I could have just, you always think about that. It's that give and take, or it's still a great adrenaline rush. It's a great exercise. It's nothing else clears my mind like going on a motorcycle ride. So mentally, it's a great to clear my mind. I'll be angry or stressed out about stuff, and my wife will be like, "You need to go for a ride." I'm like, "You know what? You're right. I do." So it's tough to draw that line.
I had a few skydivers on the show, base jumpers, and they were saying that one thing that was contributing to the deaths in their profession was people seeing some of these extreme stunts on social media without the understanding of how many thousands of jumps they had taken to get there, and then shortcutting it and then ending up, one of these horrendous, flight suit tragedies or whatever the thing is. Is there that same element in your profession where maybe there isn't the diligence in the progression of the sport and these shortcuts are causing more unneeded deaths?
Unfortunately, yeah. I mean, it's my little boy will sit and watch YouTube videos all day long, and he's into mountain biking right now, and he watches these mountain bikers. I'm like, bud, these guys make it look so easy, but you're not going to go do a double backflip over and jump. You know what I mean? It's tough, and they make it look so easy, but those guys are insane athletes. That's what they work hard at it for the last 10 years. You know what I mean? What they're doing is it's actually mind blowing what they can do. And then you got these kids who watch it. Oh, we can go do a backflip. It's not that easy. They just make it look easy. So yeah, for sure, it is changing our sport. All forms of racing right now are insane. Like the level, because people are doing it. There's families that have kids since they're like 3 years old. They're training for motocross. They go to private school. They've never been to a public school, and all they do all week long is train, and then they race every single weekend of their lives. It's actually almost out of control. Um, I almost didn't want my boy to race like that because for one, I can't afford it. For two, it's a tough life. You know what I mean? Like we talked about, it's they do that their entire lives and they get one podium and then they're like, now what? So my boy, he's in middle school. He plays basketball. He plays football. He plays baseball. He rides motorcycles. He just broke his arm in football this year. But I think it's good to be well rounded and to see what he really enjoys and try like all the different stuff. But
I think there's a danger as well, more so now than ever, of living vicariously through your child. There's a lot of, I've said this, a lot of Uncle Ricos out there,
yes,
and,
for sure.
allowing your kid to just explore all the things that are fun. And I mean, I used to ride bikes on my farm. I loved riding bikes, but never to any amount of actual skill. But, if you're immersing them and then they're like, Dad, this is all I want to do, then yeah, you obviously have to, help them down that path. But I think there are a lot of parents that are grooming their children from such a young age. You see these, MMA fighters that are like 7, 8 years old, and you're just cringing. Like, it's only a matter of time before they're going to have a really bad injury. And for what? Were they dreaming of doing this? Or is it because mom and dad thought that's what, I want a world champion one day? And is that the best parenting philosophy, or are we kind of getting too far away from the well-being of our child versus fame and performance?
Yeah, no, exactly. We see that in motocross specifically. They call it, a moto dad and a pit mom, but the dads out there screaming at their kid at the top of their lungs at every lap as they come around and yeah, it's almost getting out of control. Like I said, any form of racing, the level is just because people are pushing the envelope so much. Even in our trophy truck racing and in the Dakar Rally and in the cars, it's like everyone's pushing. Like we were supposed to do the show before Morocco, and I left for Morocco, but the pace that we were running in Morocco this last race was insane, and it's almost uncomfortable to race at that speed. But that's what you have to do if you want to, be towards the top. And our pace was off in the beginning, and we tried to find another level. And so it's just everyone's trying to push the envelope. You know what I mean? And it's a slippery slope.
Going back to Mexico, you're lying there with a broken femur, a shattered pelvis. We know obviously about the blood loss when it comes to those kind of injuries. What was your self-talk getting yourself through that when you're lying there, not knowing if you're going to be discovered for, several hours?
My cousin was with me, and he finally found me after sitting there for 2 hours because we got to a meeting point and I wasn't there. So he kind of backtracked and then he ended up finding me. His great plan was he just wanted to lay next to me in Mexico and cover us both up with sand, and we were going to die in Mexico. But no, dude, that was my first like big injury, and I had a little bit of medical training at that point, because of my dad being a fireman and everything, and I kind of knew. I didn't know the extent to what my pelvis was. My pelvis was really bad. The worst thing is in the back of your sacrum where all your nerves run through. I had a lot of nerve damage because shattered the pelvis, and it had shifted about 4 or 5 millimeters, and it had really messed up all the nerves that run through your sacrum and everything like that. But I didn't really know what to do. I don't know how I got through that one, to be honest with you, because it was 8 hours there, 3 hours to get back to the town of San Felipe in the back of a pickup truck, and I could just feel the bones grinding, and I just remember throwing up and throwing up. And then I remember getting in that Mexican ambulance in San Felipe, and they're taking me to the border. And that guy was driving so horrible, and I thought I was going to die in the ambulance. I was like, "Get me out of here! I'd just rather just drive in the back of a truck." But Then finally, when I got to Calexico, I think they drugged me up pretty good when I got in the plane. But I think I've relied on that situation a lot in my life, and it's gotten me through a lot of different scenarios and situations. Even I think that situation's even helped me on the fire department quite a bit. So I guess what they say, what doesn't hurt you makes you stronger. So
Yeah, in
or
theory.
what doesn't kill you, it doesn't make you stronger. That didn't kill me, so I definitely got stronger from that one.
So I want to hit kind of the mental and the physical. Let's start with physical first. You've had, obviously that was sounds like your most major injury, but you've had other ones as well. What are some of the elements of rehab, physical therapy that you found have worked to allow you to get back to performing at a high level at your sport, and then ultimately even the fire service?
I think the biggest thing, and I tell people, a lot of people, this is patience. I mean, you just got to be patient. I remember getting hurt, being impatient, being like, okay, talking to Dr. Edwards. All right, doc, because that's how I met Jonathan, he was our Red Bull KTM doctor. And he went to Dakar with us and did a lot of the races. I don't know, I'd be sitting on the couch being bored, like, okay, John, what can I do? Can I do this to get even faster? Can I do this to get back faster? Can I start doing this? You just got to be patient. Um, Shoot, even 4 or 5 years ago, I crashed. We were at a race with my boy, just having fun, and I shattered all my ribs, punctured my lung, had a hemothorax, pneumothorax, shattered my scapula, which my other scapula was already plated, so I didn't let him plate the scapula this time. But at that point, you just don't heal like you used to, and you got to be patient. You know what I mean? Um, Gosh dang, I just tell everyone, I see all the kids getting hurt, and it's like, you just got to be patient. Take your time. There's absolutely no reason to hurry over an injury. You know what I mean? Heal it right, do the proper rehab and stuff like that. Um, and honestly, those injuries, a lot of them are mental. Yeah, it's the physical aspect, but mentally, it wears on you.
One of the things I can't remember who it was now, one of the PTs or injury specialists I had on the show, they were talking about when your injury feels like it's healed, it's usually at about 80%. And I thought that was really important to remember, because there's this kind of fallacy in the fire service that it's a badge of honor to get back from an injury as quickly as possible. Like everyone's just waiting for you to come back to the engine. And then when you do, they're all going to applaud and give you medals. No one gives a shit. You come back when you're supposed to come back. But understanding that, yeah, what you might be expected to do, obviously your city, you might get there first shift, you have this mass shooting, and now you're dragging people around. If you're trying to rush rehabilitation, your chances of re-injury are going to be a lot higher than if, just like you said, you're patient. You make sure that you not only have the pain is gone, but you've actually forged the strength and the mobility that you need to be as close to 100% as possible. That is a time to then get back on the rig.
Yeah, I think I look back at every single one of my injuries and say I came back too soon. It is tough. It's a mental struggle when you're sitting on the couch or when you're just doing physical therapy every day and then trying to come back. Your mind starts, just the wheel starts spinning, but you just got to be patient. It's a tough situation. But like you said, that's a good perspective of, when you think you're ready, you're about 80% ready, honestly. And that's a good way to put it, and just be patient. But easier said than done, of course. But
absolutely. Well, from the mental point of view as well, there's that. I think it's a dangerous place mentally for a lot of us, because you are taken from all the things that you love, your tribe, your identity, your purpose. And I had the same thing with minor, meniscus tears, nothing compared to the stuff you just told us about. And then I fucked up my back pretty good lifting a patient about 10 years ago, and that mental element is tough. But I think, especially when you are going back into a sport that was the cause of the injuries, how do you get past the mental hesitation, the fear that is a self-preservation mechanism within the human body, to not
yep.
have that hesitation the next time that you're racing, the next time that you're on a bike?
And that's tough. Like I said, that I can go back to that femur injury in Mexico, and from then on, anytime I was going 100 miles an hour plus, it was kind of always in the back of my head. Wonder if and you hit a rock and you almost crash, and you're like, oh my gosh, I almost crashed. I could have just broke my other femur or something. It's always in your head. I think the same thing. It's when you're lifting a patient or anything at work, and you've hurt your back before that, and you go like, oh, this is how I hurt my back the last time. Doing this exact same thing, lifting this patient. For me, the biggest thing was physical therapy and trying to get stronger. I think mentally, I think we can all agree, physical therapy and working out is such a great, man, it just gets your mind in the right place. If you're down or whatever for that day and you go work out and do something strenuous and physical, it releases those chemicals into your mind that get you kind of back on place for me. So for me, working out, even now is just a huge help for me. Is just going to the gym. Cool thing with Red Bull, Red Bull is one of my personal sponsors, and they're a great company. They really do truly care about their people, and they spend a lot of money and investment into their athletes to get them mentally strong and physically strong. And so the last time I got a concussion really good was probably September. And Red Bull it's called the APC, it's Athlete Performance Center. There's a few of them throughout the world. One's in Santa Monica, California. I was able to go to the APC, and they'll run a bunch of blood tests. They do a bunch of blood work. They have a mental coach. They have a physical coach. They run a bunch of streamlined tests. UCLA is right next to them. So I ended up, because of all my concussions and my brain injuries, I ended up getting with some doctors at UCLA and going through your baseline. And the UCLA is one of the top leading uh, hospitals and research into TBIs and concussions and leading sports and when you can come back and what not to do and what to do. And that's kind of evolving. The whole TBI thing, brain concussion thing's fairly new, and it's changing almost yearly. But to be able to go to the APC and meet with the doctors at UCLA who are up on the latest and the best recovery and things to do for your brain, I'm pretty lucky to be able to do that. And that helped out quite a bit. Have that at my exposures is pretty dang nice.
Absolutely. You talked about transitioning to the fire department. We've talked about all the injuries you had prior. Was that something that you had to declare at the front door as far as the previous injuries?
I don't think I don't think I did. I think when I entered the academy, I was in pretty good shape as far as like, yeah, I still have a rod in my femur. I have a bunch of metal in my scapula, my shoulders, and my ribs are all plated on one side because I shattered my ribs and couldn't breathe. But um, I think when I went into the academy, I was in pretty dang good shape. Like I said, working out's nothing crazy, but just working out for me is a good mental, you know, rehab for me. And I think physically I was pretty good when I went to the academy. And I knew what it was going to kind of take, with my family and the fire service and what I needed to do. So I don't think it was really the biggest thing for me is my ankles were so bad. Like we jog every day in the academy and we'd stand all day long in the academy. And gosh dang, I did have to get my ankles injected throughout the academy quite a bit just to help me get through that part. And I entered the academy. I waited till I was a little bit older. I did the racing thing for a while, and so I didn't go into the academy. I got hired at Clark County when I was 28 years old. I think I turned 29 after my probationary year. So, and the academy, I think Clark County is known as is a pretty tough academy as far as physically demanding. We went into the academy. Started July 11th, which you know how hot it gets in Vegas, especially in turnouts. And we run every day in turnouts, train every day in turnouts. And you're in July. I think we had, can't remember what it was, almost 60 days of heat was over 100 degrees during our academy. But
I can
and
relate.
honestly, all that racing stuff and all those injuries, I think helped prepare me for the academy. And even now, I can go twofold. The academy and the things that we learned there and staying calm in stressful situations, stuff like that, it helps me today in the racing. It kind of goes back and forth. It's kind of weird to say it, but both career paths kind of help each other out and strengthen each other. And I get pull strengths from each one. It's actually pretty cool.
With the heat in the academy, I can relate completely because I did Fire Academy Orlando, a little bit less temperate. I think it spanned even the winter, so not too bad. But then got hired in Hialeah, which is Miami, over the summer. Then went to Anaheim, California, did an academy over the summer. And then I think Orange County again was Orlando area over the summer. But those two, Anaheim and Hialeah, in full turnout gears, with whatever it is, 1,000,000% humidity. I mean, it just awful. So I can totally relate to that.
I can't believe you did more than one academy. I get anxiety if I want to talk about doing another academy. So you did a couple of them, but that
Yeah.
was tough. Our academy was tough, but it was good. You know what I mean?
We're just going back. I meant to say this when you were talking about the rehab. This is an important thing as well. And I guess it's layered now because you said how ready you were at the front door for Clark County. But when you get hurt in a lot of places in fire departments, unless you have a kind of sports medicine background facility that you send your firefighters to. A lot of them, you'll go to a regular workman's comp facility. Like here, I was basically the only person that was under about 70 in the rehab place that I was at. A lot of elderly people with, post hip surgeries and those
Yeah.
kind of things. And so they're just not used to rehabbing you to that high level. And going to your point, when I did get hurt from my back, my goal was that, well, there was an imbalance. That's what made me get hurt in the first place. So addressing that, but then addressing the strength. And by doing, deadlifts and some of these other movements beyond where I was before, that then gave me the confidence, like, okay, when I lift that patient, I don't have to be worried because I can pull whatever it is, or I can pick the sandbag up, which is, even worse than the patient. So
Patient,
to
right.
your point, the gym, I think, is a really important place for you to create that confidence again in your body, knowing that you're not going to fall apart the next time you ask it to do something.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that was my point. If you know that you can lift more, you do more. Hey, I just did more yesterday at the gym, or we just did a skills course and I did way more than that. Mentally, it puts you in the right place. And then you're not trying to compensate somewhere else, you know what I mean? Or lift something else and get hurt again. You're not going to re-injure that. So yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned about coming from this, smaller town. Were there any aha moments when you yourself were now the one from the family in the uniform seeing, the Vegas area behind the curtain?
Yeah. So our little town here, we have a volunteer fire department, and when I turned 18, I signed up for it, um, and I got to run a bunch of calls out here. We live on a 2-lane highway, and I got to see some gnarly, gnarly traffic. It's right when I was 18, multiple fatalities, cars crashes, head-ons with semi trucks, and that kind of, you know, got me into it. And I'm like, actually, I really do want to do this. I enjoy helping these people out here. I remember one call specifically out here. We had a head on this highway, and the lady was in the back seat, and her brother and her husband were in the front, and they both were killed. And this, I'm 18, I think, just a volunteer out here helping. I'm with her because she was probably the least, had the least amount of injury. And I'm sitting talking with her, and all she did is sit there and thank us. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for helping. I'm like, you just lost your brother and your husband, and you're sitting here thanking me for helping you. That's really what got me into the fire service, and wanting to do this and help out like that. And that was at 18. And that's why I was like, I know I'm going to do this when I'm done racing. This is what I want to do. But um, being from our little town here, it's going down into Vegas. I mean, we cover the strip, and I was on the strip as a rookie for a couple of years. And then when I promoted to be an engineer, we have a fire station right at the bottom of the Aria Casino, and we're right there on the strip. And it's a rough station. You don't want to stay there too long because you're not getting any rest, and it's actually quite miserable in the summertime. There, you're up all night running on not the most favorite calls, actually stupid calls. A lot of drunk people, but yeah, I mean, we see some. Vegas is pretty gnarly. I mean, I don't think my family. I kind of tell my wife she's kind of out here in the middle of nowhere, and she doesn't really have a clue what's going on in Vegas, which is a good thing, you know what I mean? But there's definitely some. Vegas is a crazy place, and Vegas is busy. I mean, every weekend there's millions of people come to Vegas, whether it's Formula One. We just had the NFR rodeo there. Well, it's a Raiders game. Now they got a hockey team. They're building the A's stadium. I mean, Vegas is popping off right now. It's crazy.
You mentioned the wrecks that you had near your town. What were the backstories between the head-on collisions? Were they impatient drivers trying to pass, or what were you seeing over and over again?
Um, there's a lot of impatient drivers. There's a lot of sleepy drivers out here. I don't know if you've been out in the West Coast much, but from my house to Las Vegas is 74 miles, and there's probably 4 turns in the road. It's nothing but dead straight, and it goes for miles. Like at one point, I can see the road 50 miles down, and it's just dead straight going through the desert. Um, and, and honestly, we had talked about being my small town. A lot of people go to Vegas for work, and there's construction guys who leave here at 2 in the morning in the summer, work in Vegas, and come back. This is kind of a story that's kind of close to my heart, but we had a good guy here in our little town that was a fireman. He worked with my dad. Every once in a while, they'd carpool as firemen here, but he was taking the engineers academy, so he had to stay after. He didn't carpool, and I think he'd had a rough night at work, and he went to the engineers academy in the morning when he got off work, and then he grabbed a couple groceries for his wife, and was on the way home. Not sure what happened, but he went head on with a semi truck, and he didn't make it. And they lived literally two doors down from us in this little town. My wife was best friends with his wife. Obviously knew him because he was on the fire department. He had 3 kids, and yeah, it was a tough situation. But it's sleeping. I think a lot of it's sleepy drivers and impatient drivers on this highway. It's pretty dangerous. We've had quite a few construction workers who are from our little town that have fallen asleep and have had bad accidents on this highway and have passed away. So I guess it's part of living out in the middle of nowhere, I guess you'd say. But yeah.
The sleep conversation comes up a lot. It's something I talk about constantly. I mean, I don't know if it's come across your radar, but even looking at the shifts and the number of hours that we work in the fire service at the moment, and then also when we start, a lot of us do commute. I commuted an hour and a quarter, basically, usually each way for most of my career.
Okay. Yes, exactly. So yeah,
Yeah. So you're having to get there at 7:30 to relieve whoever your person is early, so they can get home before they get banged out again. So we're getting up at 4. Some people are getting up even earlier, or 5 in my case, excuse me. And so you're sleep deprived even on the way to work, and then you go to work, and then you have your hopefully 24, God forbid, 48-hour shift, and then we're driving back, and how many of us do we lose on the way home? And whether it was deliberate and it's a mental health issue, whether it was accidental with the sleep, these are big parts of the conversation. If you're going to ask someone to come in and not sleep for 24 hours, we got to give them the rest and recovery to make sure that they can get home safely as well.
Yeah. Honestly, I think probably the biggest con of being a fireman in Las Vegas, and I'm not complaining at all, but the biggest thing is the sleep for me. I didn't really realize it until I was an engineer at Station 32 in Las Vegas on the Strip at Aria. Vegas is a night town. If you've been to Vegas, everything is open 24 hours. And honestly, the city doesn't even come to life till 9 o'clock. So we're working a 24-hour shift. We are up constantly all night. We're getting mandatory a lot. So we do a modified Kelly schedule. So we'll work 24 hours on, 24 hours off. We'll do that 5 times. And then we are the last one in the Las Vegas Valley that does 6 days in a row. We'll have 6 days in a row off. So you're going to work 24 hours. You might get mandatory for 48, and then you'll do your normal shift and you'll work 72 hours in a row. And I was at that busy station. Every time I get mandatory, someone would call me up and say, hey, you want to switch and you can just stay there at 32? I'm like, well, I'm already here. So I would literally almost get like 72 hours of not much sleep at all. And then I'd try to drive home. And then you're trying to function on a daily basis. I got 4 kids, you know what I mean? And I think that was, if I look back at it, that was probably some of the darkest times in my career, is that sleep deprivation messes you up. I'm going to be honest with you. That really messes with your mind. I would come home tired, barely not even to function, not let alone trying to be a dad or attend my kids' events. And I, for some reason, was always just pissed at my wife. You know what I mean? You're just angry. You're not yourself, and it messes you up. I think that's one of the biggest things of being a fireman is this is sleep. And where we're at in Las Vegas, we're the city that doesn't sleep. We're known for that. And so that's been a tough one in my career. I think probably the biggest thing that caught my eye when I first started looking you up and looking at your podcast was the things that you're talking about and the shift change and maybe doing, most of the people in Las Vegas, other fire departments. So we have Clark County, we have Las Vegas, we have the city of Henderson, we have North Las Vegas. Everyone else is on a 4896. Yeah, I think, and the question has come up, and we're a pretty old school fire department, traditional thing. Everyone likes their 6 days. But I would say that's probably one of the biggest things that I want to look into is maybe trying to, do the 24/72 or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, this is it. The science just shows, and I won't go down this rabbit hole again because I talk about it so much on the show. But when you look at the science, 24 hours is pushing it. And it's funny because I will ask you the same exact question. Take your firefighter helmet off now. Now put on your, off-road helmet. Pre any of these important races, would you ever not sleep for 24 or 48 hours before the race?
Absolutely not. Especially as I get old, you realize how important it is, as I get older. Absolutely not. I think the Dakar Rally, you're probably not familiar with the Dakar Rally, but that's one of the, it's known as the toughest race in the world. And it's 16 days in a row racing. And the reason that makes it so tough is because you get sleep deprived. You're racing for 10 or 12 hours a day. You're coming back and doing the stuff you need to do to get ready for the next day. And that's what makes it the toughest race in the world, is that sleep deprivation. And sometimes at work, it feels like, we're at the Dakar Rally again. Because it as I get older and looking back on it, that's the toughest thing I would say of being a fireman.
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at anyone that's come on here that's either on the coaching world or the athlete side, that is the number one thing. If you're going to forge performance, you need to have rest and recovery, and sleep is the absolute most important pillar of health. I mean, you've got sleep, you've got water, you've got nutrition. Those are the things that we 100% need. And then you look at the high, the support, like you said with Red Bull, that are surrounding these high level athletes. And then you look at the people that we rely on our worst day to save our children's lives, and the chasm couldn't be any wider. And it's so crazy that we turn our backs to all the science on, not only longevity, but high level performance that we have from everyone else, tier one operators and high level athletes and, sports scientists. And we say, well, no, we can just, work 72 hours and we'll be fine. And you ask, I was having a conversation with a friend today. In the trucking world, you can only drive for so many hours before you have to rest. Now, I'm not saying that should be applied directly to the fire service in a 24-hour, but certainly have a stipulation that after that, you need to have rest and recovery. But you can't drive a semi for more than whatever it is. I'm making it up, 14, 18 hours. But you can be behind the wheel of $1 million, aerial and drive 72, not sleep for 72 hours. And that's perfectly fine. You can't be at the control of a plane without X amount of sleep, but you can be behind the steering wheel of a fire engine or cutting a roof, 4 floors up on an apartment, and that's fine. So it's crazy how we've literally turned our back to all the science that shows what we need for longevity and performance with this kind of, we'll just do more with less. And at what point, is enough enough? And we actually finally acknowledge the information that's out there.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've talked about it on the other shows, but just you could go down a whole another rabbit hole of just the lack of sleep and how it messes up your hormones and chemicals. And I just had some blood drawn at Red Bull, and I knew my testosterone was low because of the sleep habits that we have in the fire department, and because of my previous injury and my testicular torsion and losing one of my boys. But my testosterone level was like 137 or something like that, crazy low. And it's a combination of my previous trauma, but also the fire department and lack of sleep. It messes kind of everything up in your body. You got to have that rest. And so, yeah, exactly. We could go on and on about it, but it's important. And let's be honest, it's still a job. We love it and everything like that. And it's my second family, but I look back at those years and I don't remember, and my wife will tell you right now, when you were at that station and you were working all those hours, you were not yourself. You were not your regular dad. I honestly think I missed a lot of 2 years of my kids' lives. I don't remember when I would go to their volleyball games or their sporting events and their competitions. I just remember like being in a fog and a haze. You know what I mean? And I don't really remember even functioning. My wife's like, you got to like talk to your kids. I'm like, I don't want to talk to them. I can barely even like stay awake. You know what I mean? Let alone. And then she would say that, and then I'd get even grouchier and get madder, and it would just kind of blow up. You know what I mean? It was you looking back at it now, it messes you up. You know what I mean? So it is an important discussion. And looking at for future firemen, like even my oldest daughter just got married, and my son-in-law is thinking about it and what he wants to do for life, and telling him all the options, and business owner, and he's at that point in life where he's trying to figure out what to do, which is a tough point, and he's thought about the fire department, and we've talked about the same discussions and stuff like that, and the pros and the cons. And he sees me when I come home, and I'm pretty tired, and I just don't talk. You can tell there's a difference. So, yeah, it's something that we've got to address and help. Especially the new firemen that are coming on and going to work like that. So.
Yeah. Well, the new firemen that are coming on understand strength and conditioning, emotional health, relationships. I mean, they're more tuned in, which is amazing. That's fantastic. But now it's more glaring than ever. And where we've really got in trouble, I think, is we've confused the job, the profession, which I love to the point where I haven't worn a uniform for 7 years and I'm still advocating for our men and women. But between that and the way that we're worked, and in the fire academy, they weren't telling you you're going to be doing, 56 hours a week and mandatory overtime and da 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 da. They were just talking about, pulling hose and, cardiac arrhythmias and all the things like the actual job itself. So having the discussion about better working condition doesn't mean that you're not into the job. Actually, it's the opposite. Because if you want to be a better version of yourself as a medic or a firefighter, you need the rest and recovery. Because as you said, if you're, cross-eyed because you're so exhausted, how effective are you compared to if you'd been well rested? So I think this is, such an important conversation, but we've got to shake that kind of ego of it's soft if you're talking about wanting time off. No, like every other high performer in the world values their rest and recovery.
Yeah, no, exactly. If my dad and my grandpa heard me talking right now, they'd say, "Quit being such a little baby and get to work." You know what I mean? You're fine. You know what I mean? They did it for 37 years. But yeah, you gotta shake that tradition, you know what I mean, and be realistic and be like, hey, I'm not functioning on my days off or something. You gotta do something about it. So but yeah, it's we could go down that rabbit hole for a while.
All right, well, changing the rabbit hole. Speaking of holes, actually, I had a guest on, Rob Banghart, who was a former addict, formerly homeless, and he actually lived in the tunnels beneath Vegas. And I'd never heard that before. There's an author, Johan Hari, that first told me about it. Talk to me about just homelessness in general, and have you been exposed to that kind of underground network that I've heard about?
Oh, absolutely. It's insane in Vegas. I mean, I think almost everywhere in the US, the homeless is a problem. As firemen, I'm gonna say of our medical calls in Las Vegas, I'm gonna say over half are on the homeless, and a lot of them it's repeat callers. A lot of them are this time of year they're cold or they're hot. They just want to go to the hospital. It's a huge problem in Las Vegas. But I was exposed to it as a rookie. We have our main fire station, Station 18, right there off the strip. It's just east of the strip on Flamingo. The homeless are insane there, but there's a whole hierarchy. I mean, there's the underground tunnels, and there's like the landlord of this tunnel, and you have to pay rent to this guy to stay down there, and you have to do this. It's insane. I had no idea. And we've had multiple fires in the tunnels, and we've had multiple fatalities. They have all their bedding back there. If you go in the tunnel, they will pull electricity from a power light or somewhere, run it to the ground, run it into the storm drain. They'll have power down there. They'll have microwaves, toasters, coffee machines. They have beds back there. They have shelves built. It's really quite insane. Um, the whole system they have down there, and we've had fires down there, and we've had multiple fatalities. I remember, not recently, but a few years ago, we have our tech team, heavy rescue team, and they have we had a tunnel that was basically went from one side of I-15 to the other on the south end of town, and the whole thing was on fire, and there ended up being two fatalities in that one. But it took us. I didn't go down inside the tunnel or anything like that, but it was probably 4 or 5 hours before we got all the smoke cleared out of the tunnels. And I remember sitting there. This is the true story. I'm sitting in the tunnel. There's smoke billowing out of it. I'm an engineer, so I'm just kind of sitting out of the smoke, pumping water. And I remember hearing this noise coming up out of the tunnel. I'm like, what the heck? That noise is getting louder and louder. And the tunnel's just high enough, and there comes a guy on a scooter, riding a scooter up out of the tunnel, out of the smoke. He had his scooter down. He's like, yeah, I'm about like a half a mile down into the tunnels where all my stuff is. I saw the smoke, so I started riding my scooter out. It's crazy that they live down there like that. I had no idea before I got hired.
Well, Rob is doing an amazing job now of trying to help people get out of addiction, get out of homelessness, and doing it in a very holistic approach. So not just, getting clean as far as the addiction, but, housing, job creation, the whole thing. So you can really put someone back on their feet again. In, whether you're seeing this through the media, whether you're seeing it firsthand, what is the reason that you have such a homeless problem? I mean, a lot of people talk about the emptying of psych wards in the Reagan administration. I would argue that, addiction seems to be a large part of this as well. But what are you seeing with your own eyes in your area?
In my area, my station where I'm at right now, if I go out my barn doors, there's a big storm drainage ditch. and there's probably no less than 150 homeless right outside there. That whole ditch is full with tents. They'll come and clean it out once in a while, and then they'll move back in, or when it rains, they come out. It's literally, I can take a picture of it, and it looks like a camp down the entire storm drain. Um, we talk about it quite a bit, and we run on a lot of the same people. There's obviously the addiction issue. I think it's a combination of the mental side, and then once you combine that with the drug addiction and the street drugs, it's a bad combination with mental and drugs. And then you get what you have there. And then once you get there, you're desperate and you start doing things, stealing and cutting wire and copper down, stealing catalytic converters to try and, uh, you know, feed that drug addiction. It's a bad, bad circle. But when I think when you combine that, the mental side, and then you combine it with the drug addiction, it's comes into a bad situation.
It just seems to me, I mean, we had a lot, obviously, in Orange County, Anaheim as well. If I'm thinking about it, I don't remember it as much in Hialeah, but every city, every municipality has a version of this. I mean, LA and San Francisco, obviously, extremely dense, and it just blows me away because you would assume that the money we spend on the resources responding to men and women experiencing homelessness, I think is the right way of saying it. You could proactively put that into addiction counseling, housing, job creation, mental health counseling, et cetera, et cetera. And are you going to get everyone? Of course not. But I think you could get a large part of those men, women, children off the streets if we just gave them the resources that they need. But what you hear more often than not, not so much from our profession, but from the law enforcement side, is just kind of shooing them off to another jurisdiction rather than saying, well, why are these people on the streets in the first place? Being an altruistic nation with, a lot of our religious beliefs being about, helping and kindness and community, how can we address the nucleus of this problem, which in turn will then reduce the number of people that are on the streets?
Yeah, it's such a tough situation. And I think, I can guarantee almost all the homeless people that we've ran on are all alcoholics. They wake up in the morning, they start drinking a beer, and it gets it's that addiction. That addiction just tears away at your soul. You know what I mean? Um, for us, it's weird. I just ran on a homeless guy who was in our area. So I'm on the northeast part of town now. Luckily, I'm kind of off the strip, not quite as busy, and I got a little bit of seniority. I got a bit off the strip, but we ran on a guy, Jimmy. He was up in my area, and I remember running on him 10 years ago as a homeless person down on by Station 18 in Flamingo. I'm like, Jimmy, what the heck are you doing up on this side of town, man? And he's been. I think some of them, whether it's the mental trauma that they have or the combination of the addiction, but that's what he is completely happy. If you gave him the resources that he would need to get off the street, he would not choose that. He would stick to the street. He's been there for 10, 15 years. That's what he knows. He knows how to work the system and get alcohol and get his drugs and go on the strip and pedal for a little bit, get the money he needs, and then go back off the strip. So I think there's a lot of people in Las Vegas who have done it who've been homeless for years. They've made a living out of it. It's what they know. They're comfortable with it, and they're not going to change. That's what until the day he dies. I guarantee he's going to be an alcoholic and he's going to be homeless. Now, if you were to take alcohol out of the equation, could you maybe get him up out of the streets? Maybe it would change him, but he ain't going to choose that right now. And no matter what you do, you can't make him. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. You know what I mean? He's going to choose that. Now, flip it. We also ran out of a guy that was living in this car. He was a block from our station. And he says, yeah, I've got kicked out. I have a job. I go to work. I cannot pay for rent. He's like, just a single bedroom apartment. He's like, the one I was at was $1,200 a month. I just got kicked out of, and it's trash. It's disgusting. Plus, he's got to pay the other utilities. He's like, I just can't afford it with my job. I have a car. I pay my insurance on my car and everything like that. But he's a perfect example for what you're talking about. He needs better resources to help him get off the street, to get better, and then he can kind of establish himself. But it's a slippery slope, like you say. It's tough. And I'm going to say about probably about 50% of the homeless that we have would probably choose to stay on the street.
Well, it's interesting if you look at some countries in Scandinavia, I think also Japan, there are nations that have zero homelessness, and they're human beings just like us. So, the question is, well, what are you doing differently? What are these factors? And obviously it's cultural, but we can start today. Can you save the people that you're talking about? I mean, there's many that I can think of that would be a really hard fight to. I mean, they're probably all dead now anyway, but the ones that are just so far gone that it would be such a hard uphill battle. Still worth the try, but you probably can't. But that next generation, and you look at the opioid crisis in America, like that was started by a drug company, predominantly, the OxyContin crisis that then created the heroin crisis, which is now the fentanyl crisis. There's these obvious transitions. 10% of our homeless are veterans. So these are men and women, whether they actually saw combat or not, that were serving with the American flag on their shoulder, and now they're living under a bridge. So where are these kind of elements that we can start addressing it before people, become too lost into this void?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think it needs to be addressed something before, like you talked about. And I mean, it's definitely an issue and like you say, I travel the world quite a bit. You don't see any homeless I'll be in Saudi Arabia in a couple of weeks, and that situation. It's a different world in other places, but I think, like you said, you got to address it in the beginning, before it gets way out of hand.
100%. Well, speaking of mental health crises, interestingly, a story that I haven't really managed to find anyone from that event to come on the show yet, but your city had a tragic attack a few years ago. So, firstly, were you on when the Vegas shooting happened?
No, I was off. I came in that morning after they'd been up all night on the shooting, so I came in that morning.
I don't know what it is about that event, but I feel like, unlike the Pulse shooting, which we had locally here, which was right next to my old station,
okay.
With the Vegas one, it seemed to have come and then disappeared from the news outlets pretty quickly. And aside from the, well, what happened? Who was this person? Why did they do it? Element of it, I can imagine being a first responder or a good Samaritan that made such a difference that day, and then the kind of story is swept under the carpet, not to be discussed again. So that's just my perspective from thousands of miles away. It seemed, compared to other events that we've had, what needs to be told about that event and the impact that it had on your community?
You kind of hit it. I think you're right. I mean, honestly, to this day, I still don't know anything about the shooter, what his motives were, really what he was from, any of his reasonings or anything like that. It was kind of, I think now that you say it, you look at it, you're like, yeah, they want their people to come to Vegas. And, Vegas is a town of, we live off of all the people coming in. So they probably did maybe sweep it under a little bit. I remember coming in to work that day, and my station was kind of on the north end of town out by the Speedway. So we're quite a ways away from where that incident happened. But they got called up, obviously, to it, and ended up staging right close to it. And there was a lot of people. We've had a lot of training and debriefs on it since then. And I think the biggest thing that we had an issue with was there was so many Good Samaritans who were loading people in pickup trucks and injured people and people who had been shot, throwing them in pickup trucks and taking them to the emergency room that they knew of, you know what I mean? And the emergency rooms were just overwhelmed with the amount of people that were coming in and just couldn't handle it because there were just people just by the pickup trucks, literally bringing pickup trucks full of people in that were injured. So we've done a lot of training on that since. Well, I mean, let's be honest, Vegas, with the amount of stuff that's going on, the millions of people that are coming in, like we just talked about Formula One and everything like that, it's not, unfortunately, it's probably going to happen again, and we need to be prepared. And our department and the Valley have done a pretty good job of helping us with large scale events and being prepared for what if something does happen again.
Did that incident have a ripple effect? Did it change the way you with equipment, with training, with that kind of thing? Did it make people think, oh my goodness, we need to rethink some things?
Yeah, I think so. There's always an event like that. You can think of, a bunch of things that you could do to improve. And I think whether it was Metro and the county and everyone, there was things that we needed to do better. We could have done better. There's always room to improve. And I think communication is always a big deal and stuff like that. So unfortunately, when that does happen, it kind of puts you in your place like, okay, we need to train this on this better. And the next one that's going to come is going to be totally different. There's probably going to be things that we need to do better again on that one. But the level of training, we just did some training, and it was actually really good training for basically a similar situation. And we have our MacTac gear, and we have helmets and bulletproof vests, and we'll put on, and we'll have the Metro with us. And it was probably one of the best trainings that I've done recently, as far as realistic, and something that we're going to probably encounter in the future.
The reason I asked that was where I used to work in Orange County, the Pulse Club was my second due. So we had Orlando Station 5's area, and then we butted up against it. But I'd moved to the fire department that protects Disney, and that shooter actually had gone to Disney Springs first, which was my area currently, but I was
Oh,
overseas
wow.
when the shooting happened. So very strong connection between the two. But I come back from vacation after this has happened, expecting to be overwhelmed with, new trainings being scheduled and equipment. And, wow, this is a near miss. This almost happened to us, because they have him literally on film wheeling the guns in a stroller out to the Springs. There's too many cops around. He loads it all back up, and then he goes to Pulse and murders all those people. And but that's not what happened. It was nothing, zero. And I'm pulling this out the shadows partly because it is public knowledge that this is what happened, but secondly, there is no greater training opportunity than a near miss. It didn't actually happen to you in your area, so those are the ones that you don't brush under the carpet. Those are the ones you're like, my God, we were given a second chance. Let's make sure that we are ready. God forbid this happens. But the worst thing you can do is shrug your shoulders and say, well, it didn't happen, so we're okay.
Yeah, and I think our department, I mean, they knew that we could have done stuff better, and they're like, "Hey, this is probably going to happen in Vegas again." Let's be honest. And the other perspective we got, there was actually quite a few firemen on our department who were at the event, and actually had family members who, I believe there was a couple from people from our department that had family members that were injured from the incident. And they were on scene, and we got an inside view of what they could have done better, what could have happened better, and how it was happening, and what was going on. And so that was kind of helpful as well. But like you said, I think there was, two more instances in the country, this last weekend. It's unfortunately, we could go down a whole nother rabbit hole of that, but it's unfortunately not when, but it's not if, it's when it's going to happen again in Vegas, to be honest with you. And so I think we've done a good job of done training and trying to prepare ourselves.
What about triage? I had John Spiro on the show a few years ago now, and he was one of the first medics on scene in the Aurora shooting years ago. And he was saying that the way the kind of start triage was, when you actually are in one of those events, like the respiratory rate, well, there was tear gas being thrown in, and everyone was running, and the heart rate, of course their heart rate's up, they're terrified. And so it kind of made you realize that some of the training, albeit well intentioned, maybe didn't have the correct application, as we see so often now, these mass casualty events. Have you leaned into a different type of triage system, or are you still using the STAR?
No, we've gone through a couple different triage systems, and we actually have changed within the last couple of years of a different triage system as well. And in those events, like when we still have an active shooter, we're going in quick, but we're going in with Metro, and we're going to have Metro guys with us, and they're going to be protecting us with guns. Obviously, we don't have guns. We'll just have the helmets and the vest, but it's more of like a quick triage. You know what I mean? If it's kind of like a system, basically. If they're savable or they can walk, get out. If not, then we're gonna roll on to someone who's going to be have a chance to be saved better, because you just don't know how many people are going to be involved. So we've changed the triage system a couple times, and the latest one's a little bit different, but it's kind of it's flexible, because you just don't know how many people are going to be involved and how many resources you're going to have as far as getting people out.
They brought in, I think it was called SAVE training, right towards the end of my career. I think we did it in Orange County and then a little bit in the last place. But it was always kind of geared really towards a school. And we'd had discussions, especially in Disney. We were like, well, hey, if this happened in Disney Springs, if it happened in one of the theme parks, this really isn't applicable because you're not clearing room by room. It was kind of like the lock on. You had two officers at the front, two officers at the back, and you'd be working the patients in between. What has been the adaptation as far as working with the law enforcement side, protecting you in some of these large spaces that you also respond to?
It for like an active shooter with the law enforcement, we're gonna have the command presence with both entities there. Is probably the biggest thing is communicating and then going in as quick as we can. Obviously, time saves as well if you got bleeders and stuff like that. So getting in quick, but also keeping us safe with Metro as well. I think the biggest thing that now we were just talking about it is another thing that they changed after we call it October shooting, the Oktoberfest shooting in Vegas. There was we also were sending units to the hospitals to create like another triage system once they get to the hospitals to help with the influx of people that are coming to the hospitals. The hospitals were just overwhelmed at that point. So we're going to have, they're sending an engine or two with a captain and crews and setting up an incident command system at the hospital as like a second triage system to help the hospitals and to communicate, hey, we're full, send these people here, send these people to the next hospital or whatever. So I think that was one of the big pullaways from that event for future training.
Really interesting. And this is why these conversations need to happen. This is why we need to learn from these events, and we can't kind of brush them under the rug or ignore them if they didn't happen on our front yard, because there's so much value in
So
storytelling,
much.
having the humility to say this didn't go as well as we expected, which is fine. It was an absolute disaster scene. Of course, not everything's going to be going right, but what can we learn from it? And then what, as a profession, nationally or internationally, can we then share with everyone else? Hey, this happened. We tried this. We put a triage station up at the ER itself, so that all these good Samaritans, we could actually triage them before they go into the ER or even send them to a different hospital. That's the first time I've heard that. I mean, these lessons are so important, and it's not about judging and shaming departments if everything didn't go right. It's just the only thing we can do from a bad event is learn the lessons that we got from them.
Yeah, no, exactly. Swallow your pride and what can we do to become better? It happened. We need to be better. Obviously, we can be better. And even in our trainings, like our MacTech trainings with Metro and stuff, every training we'll do a hot wash and like, hey, this could have been better. And we just did that training. It was less than a month ago. And I'm like, this was actually a real situation. We could have done this better. I didn't even hear what was happening in the other room. You know what I mean? And there's just so much you can learn from those situations. But like you said, from the situation, pulling from it and be like, hey, and we did, our department did a whole breakdown of it. We had our first captain who was on due did a great job, but he was just a brand new captain there. And they were actually already out when they first got the call. And then the other thing too is they were getting so many 911 calls because people were running into different casinos. And so that casino would call 911. And then they were thinking they were having an active shooter in that casino. And so they didn't know how many active shooters they had. And that really was throwing everyone off. And then you were trying to send people to that casino. You started to send crews and fire stations trucks to that casino, and it was really at the beginning. It was honestly, it was like you said, it was a mess. No one had a clue of what was really happening or what was going on. We had reports of active shooters all up and down the whole entire strip because people were just running in that were injured and saying they were shot. So a lot to learn from those situations and a lot to improve upon for sure.
What about post-event as far as the mental health of the responders? What did that look like? And again, were there any things that were done well, any things that maybe weren't that would need to be discussed and revamped?
Yeah, our department is, and I think all departments are trying to ramp up and do better with the mental health side, right? I remember I came in that morning, and a lot of the guys who were coming in, we were basically relieving a lot of the guys who had just been there all night, and they were all going to our training center, and they were basically going to kind of have a hot wash and go over everything. And anyone who needed extra help or anyone who was struggling or had questions, it basically set up. You could almost call it almost like another command post at our training center for all the guys who had just ran the call, and they went over there and went over everything if they had questions. And we've hired, like a nurse and everything that kind of helps with our mental side as well. And I know she was there and took care of a lot of stuff. So they're trying to do better because it is, you're right. Those are, we know that it can have an effect on us mentally. And so they're trying to do better. Obviously, just like the whole incident, there was things that we needed to do better and that we can do better in the future for those situations. But I do remember that basically everyone that was involved in it went straight to our training center and tried to get a rundown and go over everything that happened, and if they needed help to stay there before they went home to their families.
Oh, good. Speaking of that, we're going to get to Jonathan and ketamine in a little bit. When you reflect back now, we talked about sleep deprivation, we talked about TBIs, even the kind of mental health struggle when you're rehabbing from an injury. What have been the lows, if any, as far as your career, the emotional mental health, and then what have been some of the tools that you've used to pick yourself up again?
For me, like just listening to the stories kind of growing up, I think maybe I have I wouldn't say like an emotional support crew, but I grew up listening to those stories. And so I was not really prepared for them. But my family would come home and talk about them, my dad and his dad. And probably not the greatest thing, but I think that's the way they kind of coped with it. You know what I mean? They talked about it and talked about their calls and the instances. And I think they got it off their chest. You know what I mean? And to this day, I mean, I don't come home and tell my wife a lot of the calls and stuff because she doesn't want to hear that. But if I need to, I can talk to my dad about it. And I don't think a lot of other people have that resource. You know what I mean? I'm kind of lucky, maybe a little bit different where it is I have those resources. And I go up to my grandpa's house to this day, and he's 92 years old. He's pretty dang old and can barely move. But I go up there and that's all he does is talk about his calls. And I was there with my kids the other night, and I got to where I'm like, I need to start recording his. He's not going to be around much longer. I need to start recording all his stories. And we've heard the stories. It's the same stories he tells over and over. But I actually did record this story. I set my phone up on the table and recorded it. And he was telling my kids, I think my daughter had asked him what was the first fatality he saw. And he says, I remember when I was first on the fire department, we went into a room. We pushed the door open, and there was a 8 or 9-year-old girl who was dead. And we could see on her door, because of the soot, we could see her hand marks trying to find the door and trying to get out of the room. And he's like, that stuck with me. And that was 60 years ago. And he remembers that to this day. And he told that story. I was able to record it, but not that that's coping with it. And that stuck with him since that day. I'm sure he'll never forget that. And he told my kids that. And it was kind of cool that my kids got to hear that. It was a pretty traumatizing story. But that's kind of the way that for us as a family, I guess we kind of coped with it as we talk about those stories and the tragedies that we were able to try and help with. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's a horrible story, but we're there trying to help that person. You know what I mean? And we've got to save a few of those incidences and change the situation for those people. So I think it's a little bit different for me, but that helps being in the firefighter family, if that makes sense, James.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. The ability just to talk. I mean, Dana Ali was on here years ago, and I remember her saying that, in theory, we shouldn't even have peer support teams. And what she was saying was if we actually were cohesive as a station and really were created an environment for us to be vulnerable in front of each other, and the fire, the dining room table was still a place where everyone talked and there were no phones, then that is your peer support. That is your ability to offload. And it sounds like you had that with this generational firefighter family at home.
Yeah, and that's a perfect way of putting it. I've never thought of that too, but like we shouldn't have peer support teams because we should be that family at the dinner table. And I come home to my family and I have that. We should be able to have that at station. And maybe I need to do better at doing that with the newer guys who are at my stations, and they can come and talk to us in the mornings when we're having, before we get relieved. That's a good point, James. I need to do better at that and making sure those guys can open up to me and being their support team instead of going. I mean, honestly, with my history and tradition, I'm not going to probably go to the hug lady or whatever you want to call it and talk to her about certain situations, but maybe I need to talk to them about my crews in the morning when we get off. And we do that to a certain extent. Everyone grabs their coffee or Red Bull in the mornings and sits at the table and talks about the shift that we had. Maybe we need to do better at that. I think maybe that's a tradition that's maybe kind of gone away from the fire department. I remember my dad and my grandpa talking about that. They would sit and talk about it. And that was literally their second family away from home that they ate, slept with, and fought fire with. And they would talk about those conversations and on their days off. And maybe we need to do better at that.
Yeah. Well, it really broke my heart. I'd left the fire service almost just in time, really, when COVID happened. And I'd hear of these fire stations and they weren't allowed to sit next to each other, weren't allowed to eat with each other. And, you've got probably in some cases less calls, in more dense populated areas, more calls, a lot more fatalities. And then they're coming back and, don't have that at all. And then you add in the smartphones and you've got this kind of destruction of exactly what it used to be. And early in my career, like Anaheim, that was it. We'd sit at the dining room table for hours sometimes talking until we got a call.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think we're getting away from that, like you say. Maybe COVID helped start that, but we need to kind of go back to that and help these newer guys coming in for sure.
100%.
Be more of a family to them, be the support team to them. So that's something that I think we could do better for sure as a fire department.
Absolutely. Well, we mentioned Jonathan Edwards. How we were connected was the fact that he was now using ketamine to help when it comes to the mental health side. I think anesthesiology is his world. And he's not the first person I had on the show that came through that profession and then found the therapeutic mental effects of that drug. Have you actually yourself gone down that path?
I have not. Jonathan's become a personal friend. And we've talked about it, and we haven't really talked about this, but I've been able to do some military training, and I've been able to work with some of the top SEALs in the U.S. and do a bunch of their training. As far as, I don't know if you know this, but the SEALs use off-road motorcycles more so now. They use side-by-sides. We have an M version of the Polaris Razor, which is the military version of the Razor, and they also have an off-road truck that they use for some of their stuff. And I've been able to work with some of those guys and amazing guys, and the military. I know that those guys are using that route, and there's even more. We were just talking about it this weekend, actually, with the group of vets that were at the race with us that we're doing. And there's even more than the ketamine. I can't remember what it's called, but they're going. Yes, they're going down to Mexico, Ensenada and Tijuana, and they're doing those quite a bit. And I know that even those guys that were talking this weekend, it's helped them out quite a bit.
Yeah, I think even from the TBI side, they're showing that I think ibogaine and psilocybin both are having brain healing properties, basically neurogenesis or neuroplasticity, whatever the official term is for the healing that they're seeing. But yeah, the damage is actually being healed. And we used to think the brain was like, when it was done, you couldn't bring it back. But they're seeing some of these plant medicines actually, change that and see growth again. So not only are you addressing the psychological issues a lot of these people have, but also the physiological issues. So it's very exciting in the first responder and military world. And for us as well, there's the 343 Fund, there's the Siren Project. There are organizations that will send firefighters, EMTs, medics, cops to these same type of retreats.
Really, I did not know that. So they were asking me, is there any of, do you know of any of, are they sending firemen down there? Is there any firemen that are doing that? And I said, I don't think so. I didn't actually know that. And I know that the military is getting big on it, especially with some of the retired SEALs and stuff like that. They're huge into it, and it's helping a lot of the guys. And I actually did not know that there was firemen, first responders they were going down and doing that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be doing a version of that in February, if everything stays as it is, because for me, it's less. I'd say less about TBIs. I'm as a martial artist most of my life, and a lot of people punched me and kicked me in the head. And I did stunts, so there was some of those where you took a hard hit, but also it's like the thing beneath the thing. I've never been troubled, kind of like you. I think the kind of family that I grew up with, I grew up on a farm. There's a lot of healing elements to my upbringing, despite the traumas. But there's the brain fog. There's the not feeling like you ever get like a full deep night's sleep. There's GI issues. There's some things like, okay, there's clearly some shit that I'm not seeing that I need to unpack. So I'm hoping that will be that little find that little chest that's locked away somewhere in our minds that you can open and start processing it. And now because it's, for me, it's about optimizing now. I'm not struggling. I don't have flashbacks or any of the things that some of our men and women struggle with. But how much better can you just be? as a husband, as a parent, as a, a writer, as a firefighter, whatever it is, if these are going to unlock, the next level. And I think this is a good argument in mental health. Stop thinking about it as in it's a weakness, I'm broken. These same therapeutics can forge performance. Like, you will be better at primary searches on the roof, your pediatric codes. You will be an optimal firefighter if you can address the things that need to be addressed within your mind, within your body. So I think if we look at this as a performance enhancing tool as well, it takes away some of that stigma that's around, not only the mental health conversation, but also the drug conversation.
Yeah. And it's funny, we were just literally talking about this last night and the night before. The owner of our race team, I've become really good friends with, and he's gone down and done it in Mexico. And he's like, I cannot believe it's not legal in the US for what he was doing. And he's like, I don't tell many people this. And he ended up telling the story, and the way that it helped him, it's literally life changing. So he's actually taken multiple vets down there and helped them do it as well. And he actually ended up taking his some of his family members down there and his girlfriend. Because for him, he's like, the way he told me the story, and I've just to hear how it changed his life, that's huge. And it still affected him, and it's made him a better person to this day. He's like, it was a great experience for me. I'm like, I'm kind of like you, whereas I really haven't had those issues. I've had a lot of concussions, so it's probably coming down to that. I was at USLA, and I've had over 25 good concussions. I've had 8 or 10 times where I've been knocked out and don't remember anything for a long time. So I'm sure maybe down the road it's coming. But luckily, with my family and my faith and everything like that, I've been able to not have any issues, and mentally haven't had those issues. But I know that they're real, and if there's something that we can do to fix it, how good is that? Or to even help with it, or help these guys cope with it, we should be taking advantage of that. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, even going back to what we were talking about earlier, imagine if people had access to, some of these therapeutics, ibogaine, for example. Imagine the impact on homelessness in America. Like, you could just get someone to basically zero out their opioid addiction, their alcoholism, which we're seeing
exactly, or
that
to reset it, whereas there's no other way that we know of right now in our, we cannot do that. And I've some of the military guys were talking about it was like a reset button for them and their issues. You know what I mean? How huge can that be? So yeah, that's a pretty interesting topic for sure.
Absolutely. Well, I want to go to some closing questions, be mindful of your time. Before we do, though, are there any other elements that you want to talk about, or even any other kind of calls as we reflect as far as you progressing you through your career?
No, not really. I mean, it's been like you said, it's interesting because of my family history and everything like that. But it's been a good career for me. I've really enjoyed it. For me, I'm almost kind of doing 2 careers. I'll do the racing thing, and sometimes I just come back and I'm like, I'm so glad just to go back to work, to sit with my fire station guys and just to run a couple calls. And the racing can get stressful to me, to be honest with you, not to sound like a baby, but it's a lot of work, it's a lot of travel, and it's a lot of stress. Just like we're getting ready for Dakar this year, and we've got some big sponsors, and those sponsors are expecting us to do really good. And Ford's put a lot of money into our program, and if they're spending that much money, they want to win. Anyway, there's a lot of stress, and so sometimes it's good for me to just come home and I go to the fire station and go to work. So I've really enjoyed. Pretty lucky to have the fire department and then also the racing career. It kind of helps each other hand in hand, to be honest.
You just hit on a topic. Actually, I'll just quickly go to that. We were talking about the work week. One of the pushbacks that I've had is, well, if we give these guys more time off, they'll just work more. And, I've always said, well, firstly, that's a very arrogant thing to say. You don't own these people. They just work when they're supposed to be working. But there's a difference between having so many vacancies that there's so much overtime that work more means more hours at your fire department, another sleepless night, versus doing something on the side. And if you had a fully staffed 4-platoon system, 24/72, that's attracted people back into the fire service, so you've got nice long lists again, like we used to, and so the overtime now is few and far between. Still there, especially for events and stuff, but not crippling like it is at the moment. Now you've got the opportunity for more rest and recovery and time to focus on something else that you love doing. And this is exactly kind of what you're doing at the moment, even though the shifts aren't set up for this. But you've got another entire profession. You've got another entire tribe, another identity, another ability to make money. So that God forbid you can't be a firefighter anymore. You've got a safety net. And I think that's so important. Just being a firefighter, there's a lot of downsides to that, including when you transition out, everything that you were is gone, versus you've got this side passion that you also do where, apart from when you're racing, obviously every night you're in your bed, with your family and, having dinner and all the things. You're not working overnight. So I think there's so much to be said for being all in for 24 hours and then being passionate about something on your days off as well. I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing, as long as you're not working throughout the night every night.
Yeah, and I agree. Like my dad, he had nothing else. His fire department was his life. He retired, and I remember going over to the house one day. He lives not too far from me. He's like, I used to have respect and a job. Now I'm just your mom's laundry folder. And he didn't know what to do when he first retired. You know what I mean? Um, you got to have that. I think just like we were talking about sports, right? If these kids are all in one sport their whole entire life, they just get burned out and then they don't know what else to do. For me, like talking about it, it's almost like a release. I go to the fire department and have a few calls, stressful nights, long nights, and then I can come home and do that racing thing. And it kind of like is another reset for me and helps me mentally. Same thing when I'm done racing or whatever, like I was just talking about, when I stressed out about that, I can come back and go to the fire station. It kind of helps me reset as well. I think it's good to have, you got to have that stuff, right? You got to have something to fall back on to release that stress. And let's be honest, I mean, the fire department, it can wear on you. You got to have something when you get home, whether it's a project or something like that to work on, to like, just like we're talking about. So I agree with you on your scheduling. Yeah, you're going to have more guys sign up or whatever, but that's going to be the guys that want to sign up and work, that are willing to work. You're not forcing the guys who knows what someone's going through, whether it's a divorce or something at home as well as the job, and it's just stressing them out to the max. It's going to give those guys an opportunity to rest up and kind of mentally reset, and you need that.
Yeah. Well, and even, the cause of the divorces, as you said, when we go home and we're exhausted and then, you're supposed to be home, there's an event you're going to do with your partner or your children, and now you got to call them and say, hey, I got forced, I'm not coming home after all. Now that other partner has to be a single parent for another 24, 48 hours on top of what they're trying to do. These are all fractures to our relationships with our partners, with our children. So when you get people home when they're supposed to, for 42 hours a week, the impact that that's going to have on relationships in the fire service is going to be amazing. So hopefully you won't have as many people going through divorces and these kind of things, because yes, there might be like with my first marriage, just those two personalities weren't destined to be together forever. But I've got lots of friends that were head over heels in love with their partners, and I watched the job break them down, and it destroyed their marriage. And it was the job that did it, the way that they were worked, rather than how we could do it in a healthy way. So I think that, we joke about the people saying in 10 years, you'll be on your third divorce and have an alcohol problem. There's nothing funny about that. And we can turn that around. If you went to a bank or a supermarket or whatever, and that was what they told you at the front door, you'd be like, what the fuck are you doing? How is that a thing in this business? But in our profession, we laugh about it. So I think we could really make it an emotionally and relationship healthy profession if we address this issue too. So I mean, there literally are no downsides, to be honest, but this is a massive one. Imagine if you had a lot of firefighter marriages that stayed intact. That in itself is worth the fight.
There's always room for improvement, right? And this is an area that I see that we need to improve upon. And I've already talked to one of my good friends who's a chief and said, hey, what do you think about this? What can we do about this? And I think we're a long ways out, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed. My good friend who's on the fire department, he told me when I was at Station 32, he's like, dude, that station almost cost me my marriage. And I'm like, I knew it, dude. I know, like, now that I look back on it, I'm like, you're absolutely right. He's like, no, dude. It's like, I'm telling you, I was not the same person. I'm like, I know, it's exactly right. So there's definitely things that we need to do to improve, right? And it's sooner the better, because we're changing lives. So yeah, I really appreciate what you're doing with that, to be honest with you. And I'd love to have you come out and to our fire station and talk and work on things that we need to do to get that, changed.
Yeah. Well, I hope it becomes a nationwide profession standard. I mean, it really does. So the rising tide lifts all ships. The first, early adopters obviously are going to forge a path. Plano, Texas has just gone to it, and they're doing it in 4 years, but they've initiated it now. So that's a lot closer to you. The West Coast, it's interesting. Like Southern California, it's like, they've never even thought of that concept. But if you go Pacific Northwest, they actually have 4 platoons, but they have debit days. So their thing is obviously we'll make those debit days go away. So all these different things. The Northeast has been working 42 hours for a long, long time. So it's getting all these wires to connect, getting these people to realize, A, they deserve it and their families deserve it. B, it's absolutely possible. C, the money is there. It's just all downstream with overtime. And then D, how do you figure out how to work in your department? If Plano, Texas can do it in 4 years, you can do it in 4 years. So
Yeah.
I think I feel it's exciting. So, but if I can help in any way, just let me know.
Will do, for sure.
All right. Well, the first of the closing questions: is there a book, or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today, or completely unrelated.
Dr. Jonathan Edwards has written a couple books and that are really good. And John's really good at, he understands the mental side as well, being an athlete himself and being a doctor now. And Jonathan's put out some really great books. You can look up his website, Jonathan Edwards, but you've had him on there before as well. I'd recommend those for sure.
Absolutely. What about films, documentary, television? Any of those that you love?
Documentaries. I love documentaries, hearing about people that do amazing things that inspire me. I'm flying a lot overseas and everything like that. And on our flights, I always get to watch a documentary. And for me, motivating documentaries are extraordinary people who do things and accomplish things that is just amazing, that motivates me. I love good documentaries. I can't think of one offhand that I've just watched or anything, but for me, also podcasts, and I travel a lot, like we talk about, even to work 2 hours a day. For me, podcasts that are motivating, that talk to people. I mean, you've even had some great podcasts as well of people that are motivating, that are just doing great things in life and that inspire me to be better. You know what I mean? So podcasts and documentaries like that are really good. And like, I'll get off work in the morning, drive 2 hours to Alamo. I'll pop in a good podcast, and it kind of helps me reset as well. So just doing those things and listening to those things that are positive and upbeat, that make you want to be a better person. I like a lot of the military podcasts as well, that the Sean Ryan show, and just talking to people that have done amazing things in life makes me want to be a better person, inspires me, and helps me to realize that I don't have life that bad,
Well, speaking of amazing people, is there a person that you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
Yeah, I'll give you. I've got a good one of our battalion chiefs, who's now our assistant chief. He was a captain of mine for a while. He's just a good, inspiring person, good person. He's always working hard, doing it better. You need to talk to him, and you need to talk him into making sure that our department gets onto the different schedule.
We can make that happen. All right. Well, then the last question before we make sure everyone knows where to find you: what do you do to decompress?
Family. Spend time with my kids. I don't get to see them quite as much as I can, but just my kids are inspiring to me and want me to be a better dad. There's not much you can do in this life that you can take with you, but I believe that your family and the associations that you have with your kids, and the way that you raise your kids, is going to stick around forever. And it's you're going to be your legacy. Being able to spend time with my kids, try to help them to become better, be an example to them, is something that just for our belief in our religious, that's it's what this life's all about, is being able to raise good family, raise good kids who are going to be productive in society. And my kids are inspiring to me to see the things that they love to do, to watch their lives develop and stuff like that. It's a great reset to me, just be able to spend some time with my kids and being able to see how simple they take life. And yeah, family's important to us in my faith and stuff like that. So being able to stick with family, and then also I love mountain biking and motorcycle riding. If I need to reset or go get some exercise, I'll go mountain biking or I'll go ride my motorcycle, and it's the ultimate, just clears my mind. It's a good, mental workout and a good physical workout. It's something that it's my go-to. I don't get to do it very much anymore. And you gotta be careful not to get hurt, but that's my go-to is mountain biking or going to ride motocross.
Love it. Yeah, with the family, I think this is what I've talked about a lot with, just again, the environment that we were talking about a minute ago, as far as the way we're worked. There's a lot of chasing of money, when it comes to negotiations, it's the pay raises. But I always say, well, what's the ultimate currency? The ultimate currency, in my opinion, is time with your family, because you can never, ever get that back. So, that's the same as you. For me, that's what I always look forward to. That was my decompression, was time with family. So sometimes I guess a little blurred, especially when we're exhausted and, run into the ground. But if not for them, then who?
Yeah, no, exactly. And I got to find a balance. We're always trying to balance in life, but my balance is off right now. I'm going to be honest with you. Just with the fire department, and in order for me to make all my races, I do a bunch of shift trades, which we're allowed to do. So when I am home, I'm not actually home. I'm at the fire station repaying people back for all my shift trades. And unfortunately, my family's kind of taking the back seat, it seems like. So I need to do a reset and figure out a better balance in my life right now as well, and put my family first. So I'm glad we were able to talk about it today.
Yeah, me too. Well, for people listening, if they do want to learn more about you, follow you, where are the best places online?
I'm old, so I'm horrible at social media. Red Bull says I even need to do better, and I get in trouble for not posting a bunch of stuff. But Kellon Walch, Kellon, Walch, Walch, at Instagram, Facebook. Also, the Dakar Rally. If you follow the Dakar Rally, if anyone's interested in the Dakar Rally or knows what it is, if you don't, it's quite interesting. It's getting ready to happen in January. It's the longest, toughest off-road race in the world. The DakarRally.com has a website. It's daily updates. I think it's in like 90 different languages and broadcast all throughout the world. If you go to Europe or anywhere else in the world, the Dakar Rally is huge. Everyone knows what it is. It's not quite as big in the US, but it's getting bigger. But we have the Dakar Rally coming up in January. It's in Saudi Arabia. Ford puts out they do a good documentary on it. I can send you the links to the documentary from last year. Ford did a really good job. Myself and we never talked about this, but I'm just a navigator. I don't even drive right now. But my driver's name's Mitch Guthrie. We're getting ready to do Dakar. So it's the big one for us. It's like the Super Bowl. So that's our biggest race in January. And it's pretty interesting to follow. If you're not familiar with it, check it out and follow along in January. It's intense.
Brilliant. Well, good luck. I'm sure I'll speak to you before, but with that being said, I want to thank you so much. I mean, like we said, we had to kind of go back and forth to make this work, as you alluded to. You're at a station, or you're training, or you're racing. So I'm so glad that we got to sit down. I mean, we've been all over the place today with our discussion. So I want to thank
Yeah,
you.
we have.
So I want to thank you.
I wasn't sure what we're going to talk about, but no, I appreciate your patience with me. I've enjoyed it. And like I said, ever since Jonathan told me about you, I've really enjoyed your podcast. It's helped me pass the drive time a lot, actually, with some good, valuable information. So thanks for what you're doing. Keep up the good work.